World, Arya ji and friends at the World Hindu Council of America. Thank you for inviting me today. Can you all hear me properly? Or do we
Yes,
make it?
Yes, we can. We can.
Thank you. You will all be aware that in Greece and other parts of the ancient world where native religions and cultures were almost obliterated by the early Christian evangelists, the surviving communities are struggling today to resurrect what they can of their once glorious traditions. Too much has been lost, you know. They literally have to reinvent their traditions. These tiny groups in different countries, mainly in Europe, have little, if any, connection or interaction with the larger societies in which they live in those countries. India, however, has survived the assault of 2 millenarian traditions that sought to subjugate and subvert her ancient civilization, and it is currently under the pressure of a 3rd millenarian tradition, which we all know is Marxism, communism, and all its variants. But India has still managed to maintain the diversity and the continuity of its cultures and traditions. These cultures, little all over the country with distinct features, have always mingled with the neighboring societies within the country, within the states, and they have created small or larger regional identities without loss of their original identity. That is why unity without uniformity is the hallmark of Hindu civilization. India's very large tribal population offers us unique insight into the making of our civilization. The tribals are the bedrock of Hindu civilization. They are vibrant groups in the states where they are rooted. Very few tribes live in extreme isolation with customs and rituals frozen in time. You can readily relate some of the Andaman tribes to this situation. There are very few. And on the mainland, there are almost none. Very few tribes, therefore, live in this isolation. Most are dynamic with evolving aspirations, especially political and economic aspirations. Now, Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, the most recent states in India, have risen out of these tribal aspirations to not be frozen as some kind of living museum pieces, as envisaged by Arya Elvin, who guided the Indian domestic policy on this matter. So we have to see the tribals, as I do, as living ancestors. They are maintaining those primordial traditions, they are maintaining memory, they are developing scripts to save the knowledge which they remember. And writing, you know, is a tool of the intelligence. It is a technology to preserve knowledge. When the Vedas and other knowledge became too vast to be controlled only orally, therefore we started writing it. So writing had developed earlier for trade and other purposes, which we also know. Now tribals are going to that stage. I've met tribals in Madhya Pradesh. They're educated, they're highly alert. They're studying and preserving their own traditions in the academic field. So this is how contemporary they are today. Now, therefore, we have to see the tribals as our living ancestors. They are the anchors of our culture and civilization. Our problem goes back to the British period, when the colonial rulers said that tribals are not mainstream Hindu society members and they have to be separated. They have created these divisions in the sense that the tribal and the Hindu caste communities living side by side in an area will always have relationships. But because our entire elite post-independence was Marxist or, you know, a continuity of the colonial desires, we continue to perpetuate them in a different way. This is an attempt to overcome these divisions. So that was the raison d'etre for my book, Adidev Arya Devta, a panoramic view of tribal Hindu cultural interface. The idea was to establish one, that from the dawn of civilization, India's tribal communities sanctified the land with divinities. In every hamlet, village, hill, mountain, forest, they united the land and the people in small or large regions and maintained a continuity up to the present times. These indigenous communities are our living ancestors. They are the progenitors of our faith and culture, language and dialects. Third, India alone has this distinction of having an unbroken continuity with the genesis of its civilization. And I cannot emphasize this point enough. If you meet the Greeks and other people, I meet Central Europeans who speak on their, what they can call gypsy traditions, they've lost everything. We are very, very fortunate. Now we look first at colonial scholarship. It is very sad that the colonial thought process continues to dominate our mental landscape to this day. It has broadly taken two forms. I'm sure you will all relate to this. One is the familiar form of the Indian academics, especially those with Western education, viewing India from the Western perspective from outside in. And the post-colonial teaching at college level is the best example of this thought and need not detain us here. Academics who did not subscribe to this paradigm, and there were many, did not create an alternative school of thought. And that is where people like us, people like me, latecomers who have fitted into that paradigm, we are not enough. We are singular, you can call us lone wolves, academic lone wolves. We could not create the corpus needed to combat this, and that vacancy is there till today. So your young generations are enjoined, if they are interested, to come forward and create, add to this corpus. People have done work, and some of the people I refer to in my notes, footnotes and book, they've done fabulous work, but it's not enough. You don't think of them as a block, that is very important. The second perspective, which is notable in recent years, especially outside of academia, is a tendency to view Hindu dharma and civilization in monotheistic terms and to try to reform it in quotes by social pressure and pose a threat to the diversity that is the cornerstone of Hindu civilization. This is currently an aggressive form of urban Hindu proselytization, and I will discuss this at the end. So the colonial scholarship portrays India's tribes as primitive social groups that are separate from mainstream Hindu society, whereas anyone looking at the cultural, civilizational landscape cannot but note the deep symbiotic relations between these two groups. And this has existed from primordial times. In fact, when we look carefully, the tribe, that is the Gan, the Jan, the Jati, itself evolved into castes. And therefore, it was natural that it would engage with caste Hindu society, even though some groups did become relatively secluded for various reasons. Now, the funny thing here, again, you have this duality of life. The colonial era anthropologists who went into the field and documented the life of the tribes and what they could glean of their religion, their culture, their mores, they found that there is relationship, undeniable, and there's a continuity here. They even recorded it. That is what I have reduced in my book. But the bosses on top, the colonial state, they maintain the falsity of this division, and that continued for a very long time. This is the challenge to overcome it. So these things were recorded honestly in the field, never allowed to come into mainstream academics. Actually, in fact, I've told a couple of people to help me if they can, that in states where there are tribal studies, my book should be included as a recommended reader for people to have an idea of what's going on. Because I've taken this perspective, which so far nobody else has. Even our modern post-independence, the honest anthropologists, the honest scholars, they continued with this invisible colonial paradigm of going to a tribe, seeing it in isolation rather than as part of a larger group, and recording their length and their height and their weight and coming back to their houses on stilts or underground. That is a very primitive way of studying anything. But that unfortunately was our unfairness. So we continue to have things like tribal and Hindu as categories. And for academic convenience, we stick to that. A tribe can be something that is following traditional practices, not totally common with the caste in the urban society. And the Hindu is that which will have a formal temple with rituals and shastras and the philosophy for which we are famous. But there is no such thing as a division. For years, even academic, even good nationalist Hindus fell into the trap of looking at a village community, 10 village communities, and saying these are the little traditions of India. And then saying there's a larger tradition, the great tradition of India, which is bound with the Sanskrit language, the great epics, the veneration of cow, tirthas, and all that. What we know as the formal scholarly Hinduism, nobody is denying this. But the Hinduization of tribal gods is the one big reality of India. And everywhere, when we look carefully, we see that all the gods are tribal gods. Jagannath, you will recognize most easily. Ayyappa in Kerala. I've just done a book on Sabrimala. I was shocked at the ways Ayyappa has united all the Gram Devtas of that region, all the spiritual traditions of India, and emerged as a god who is regional, and he now has a national following. This happened in Puri also. So everywhere we see that there is the tribal influx into, so this, it is only the tribe which is always coming up. So that means that is the root. Nobody in metropolitan Bombay or Delhi has created a devta and sent it down. That's never happened. So we have to recognize that this is who we are. We are the legatees of our tribal devtas. And now this is what I'm inviting you to look at with me. The pan-India deities begin, you won't even imagine it easily. They are the mother goddess, Devi Ma, who's Parvati, Dharati, etc. All the names, she is a tribal goddess. And in the tribes, she is still given the non-vegetarian offering, which is a hallmark of the tribal origin. And then Nag, the serpent. The serpent is a symbol of wisdom, of power, of the fertility of the field. And that is also a tribal god. It's become so pan-India that we don't think of it. But everywhere in any major temple you go, you will find a space where the Nag is made separately, small little special stone for the Nag Devta, especially in South Indian temples, because they are more adherent to tradition. And these are the beginnings of religion in India. This is in classical Hinduism till today. We celebrate Nag Panchami, which is the festival in Shravan. And this is to celebrate the importance of Nag as a deity in the lives of people. Then it moves up in the form of association with Shiva. Shiva is the unites Shiva and Shakti with his snake, what do you say, attributes of Shiva, and the tribal goddesses are related with the Shivling, which is a uniconical murti. It's yoni and the link, the symbol of the origins of creation. And it is a murti, it is Shiv and Shakti. That is the beginning of worship in India. Then you have Vishnu. He also has tribal origins with his incarnations like Varaha and Narsimha. These are also having female forms called Varahi and Narsimhi. These are very important tribal goddesses. They are also tantric goddesses. So we have taken that from these people. Now, Vishnu is a composite deity. He is amalgamated various tribal gods in his personality. And you will easily understand when I say Vasudev was the god of the Vrishni tribe. His worship was recorded by Panini as early as the 5th, 6th centuries BC. Krishna was the god of the Yadav clan. Gopal was the god of the Abhira tribe. Narayan was the lord of the Hindu Kush. And Vishnu was also known as Vishnu Divakar when he was having a solar origin. He defeated Surya Dev and he is known as Vishnu Divakar. Then Vishnu was worshipped as Varaha mainly up to the Gupta period, after which he became more popular as Ram and Krishna. Krishna also includes Radha, and she is the goddess of the Abhira tribe. So again, you're finding again everywhere male and female principle in the main Hindu tradition. And this is what makes us so different from other faiths, which have suppressed or eliminated the female divinity. Let's never forget that our female divinities make us so powerful as a civilization. And this has probably saved us in the past also. In very much times of crisis, whether it is Ma Bhavani or Ma Kali, they have given succor to Hindu civilization. So Radha is recorded in Halas Gatha Saptshati, which goes back not later than 200 AD. I'll not go into those details. But the major spiritual trends in Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism are part of this culture, at least I always maintain it. And they are also very ancient, more than 2,500 years each, much more. Just the principal Buddha and Jain and Mahavir are 2,500 plus years old, according to the academic consensus. So here also we find that when these religions centered around personalities are rising, then the tribal community in those areas also becomes attracted to them and goes that way. So you have, they have tribal links themselves. Gautam and Mahavir are the scions of the Sakya and Janatrika tribes. They are part of the Vriji Confederation of 77 tribes in the Vaishali region. And Parashnathji, he was born in Banaras to a king, Ashwasena. And when he was born, he had a blue colored body and marks that looked like snakes on his body. So he was called Fani Bhushan. And that is also a name of Shiva. So this intermingling of all the spiritual traditions of India is also a feature of our civilization, and the tribals are always part of it. The Shiva and the Shakti snake worship amalgamates in the Bengal and Eastern India side as Mansa Devi Path. Everyone would have heard of Mansa Devi. There's also a temple in Hardwar. I've been there. So we look at the other divinities. Tribals and caste Hindus, tell me if you don't worship the sun, Savitur, Agni, forest paths, Van Devi, elephant, lion, eagle, plants like tulsi, sacred trees like people, rivers and natural springs. Every time there is a bond between the tribal and the Hindu belief. Essentially, whatever the tribals believed in, we have also believed in, because we come from there. They don't come from us. So tribals, as I said, always have this connection with early villages. The Gram Devta is a tribal goddess. Gram Devta is almost always a goddess, and it is tribal. She is the deity of the village, and she is worshipped mostly as a stone under a tree with a little vermilion or the orange color of Hanumanji. You will have a trident under a tree till today. You have so many things which are purely tribal in their context. The tribals always, because they lived in the forest mostly, close to nature and the powerful spirits and beings in that environment. So their deities would have a fierce Ugra form. So Durga had an Ugra form, Shiva had an Ugra form, Vishnu as Narsimha had an Ugra form. And we all know the story of Hiranyakashipu when he burst out of a pillar in the palace to save Bhakt Prahlad. This pillar itself became a very important motif in Hindu society. You had Shiva bursting as Bhairav from a pillar. The pillar itself was known as Khambeshwari, the goddess who resides in the pillar, and she is supposed to give her Shakti to the male gods who emerged from the pillar. So again, these philosophical underpinnings of Hindu society have a tribal root. And Tantrism, as I said, has a strong tribal root. And Tantrism is very, very important under investigated aspect of our civilization. I came to know something when I was studying Sabrimala, but as of now, it's just something that we have to know. Our mantras, our yantras come from there. But beyond that, because it has been so much maligned as black magic, people like me, now we are too old to go into it and study it. So we have a popular tribal god, Jagannath. He was the original god of the Saura tribe in the Orissa region. And then one day he arrived in Puri very mysteriously. But the important thing here is that the Daityas are his original worshippers. And only they in the temple can touch the god, change his dress, feed him the bhog every day. And then because it's a wooden image, it has to be replaced every 12 or 20 years. It used to be 20, now somebody has told me it's become 12. This can be done only by the original tribal gods, worshippers. The Brahmin worshippers, priests, were incorporated into the Jagannath temple by the kings, because when Bhaks came from other parts of India, they could not relate to the tribal priests, their language, their customs and things. So the Brahmins coexisted with these priests. Even at Lingaraj temple in Bhubaneswar, the same, the Badus are the traditional priests. They alone can touch the god, but the Brahmin priests are there for the rest of us when we go. for the tourist, the pilgrim who is not a regular devotee of the place. So when we come across this correlation over a period of time between tribes and non-tribes, the thing that we note is that the tribals had the same aspirations of the era in which they lived. And that is why they always wanted status within the larger Hindu society, which became very pronounced in the British period when they could hopefully get something much faster. Earlier, what was happening is because the tribe is the same as the Hindu society, portions of the tribes would rise according to their merit in a political environment that was conducive, like in a kingdom. You make an impact on a king, or you become the king yourself, and then you rise. Tribals, I wanted to see the social structure of tribes and what we call ourselves as caste Hindus. It is rooted in the same forms of society. So the word Jat or Jati is equally applicable to caste or to tribe. Caste actually means Jati because caste is the Portuguese word. Our own word is Jati or Gotra. Gotra has a tribal origin, which we'll discuss later. But tribes and caste Hindus have the claim of common descent from a common ancestor, a common language, endogamy and clan exogamy. We are so particular how many gotras and affinities that we have to leave if we are going to get married in the same clan. We have caste or tribal councils, which have become the local panchayats. We have taboos in the matter of diet and marriage. The diet taboos are mostly ways of distinguishing yourself from others, and also a way I believe that our gurus did it, leaving certain foods for other people. These days it has become a fashion for everyone to eat everything, and I have no complaint with that. But in a most stable society with less social mobility, chances of famine and so many things, the idea of following the jungle tradition of leaving things. Like in the jungle, every vegetarian animal, does not eat everything. They will go for their certain plants. So this idea has come from there, that we will eat certain things and the other thing may not be poison, but we will not eat it. That is also a tribal tradition. They have followed it more than we. Now I'll come to the talk of the little and great traditions. Accidentally, in India, this became popular with the great sociologist, eminent. It was quite accidental. He was studying the Kurk society and he noticed that there is some kind of relationship between the little society of a small village and the larger Hindu society. And he said that he noticed that the lower strata always seeks higher status in Hindu society through a process called Sanskritization, which was true. So he said that there is therefore an all India faith and there is a local Hinduism, and the common features which I told you, Sanskrit language, faith mostly in Shiva or Vishnu, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the Tirthas and things, and the paramountcy of Brahmins. Largely, all of us can relate to this. But what happened is that this little tradition and great tradition, this was also an academic convenience, which means it's an artificial construct. It was Robert Redford, an American anthropologist. He came up with this as a way of understanding what happened to little folk traditions in the West when urbanization and modernization came upon them. So he said that this urbanization helped to transform the little rural and folk traditions into the core culture of the indigenous civilization, which may have worked for Europe, I don't know. Excuse me, hello? Hello, can you hear me? This artificial construction of great and small does not apply to Hindu Dharma because we do not have a linear link between Sanskrit language and Sanskritic tradition. There are epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata which were written in Sanskrit, but they have regional recensions which are also 2000 plus years old, and they are classics in their own right. You have Kamba Ramayana in the south, you have Saral Das in Orissa, and everywhere where you go, some local guru, some has created his own version of some of the stories of the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. They are really all India classics. So this thing of great and small never worked for India. And finally, the Western scholars themselves, like Milton Singer, they said, we have stopped looking for the orthodox version of Hinduism. There is no such thing. Because we do not in Hindu Dharma have a canon. We don't have just one version of anything. So this never worked, and it is good that we have realized that every tradition is local or all India in Hindu tradition. There is no hierarchy. Now I want to discuss a very important indigenous tribe called the Kirats. They are most famous. You would have heard of the Nishads. They are the most popular of the Kirat tribes, but Kirats are very, very ancient, and they gave so much that is so valuable in Hindu tradition. They are mostly in the Gangetic plains, the Himalayas. They went up to the Deccan. They took over the whole northeast, went up to Nepal. They were very, very pervasive. They lived in the hills. They lived in the mountains. They lived by hunting. They were very, very important. Some of them claim to be of Brahmin origins. Some of them claim to be Kshatriyas. At least 12 castes slipped from Kshatriya to tribal Shudra rank in the Yajurveda because they did not follow the rituals of the tradition. And so this is how they became lawless, or Vratyas, and now they became Malech, Tasyu, all these words that we created at that time as part of our prejudices. And they were everywhere. King Yayati also expelled them for not following rituals. And it goes on. The Kalika Puran says, Kirats were the indigenous inhabitants of Kamrup. Kalhan mentions them in Ras Tirangini in the 12th century. They were noted by the British also as people who were forest tribes and who employed Brahmins as priests. Northeast, King Ghatak, king who defeated Darak. The Mahabharata mentions the Chinas in the armies of the time. They are just too important to be ignored. They were veteran traders. The Arya Brahmana mentions them as the people who brought the som plant for the Aryas. And they used to have they had access to fabulous wealth. They could not have been a very primitive people, because if you look at the Mahabharata, when they came to bring tributes to Yudhishthir for his coronation, they bought massive miles and mounds of sandalwood, agarwood, black wood, black arrow, black pepper, alagogium, skins of various animals, high quality leather, precious stones, huge quantities of gold from the mountains, silver, gems like rubies, pearls, perfumes, herbs, exotic animals, birds, and all kinds of gifts. So the Kirats were also very adept at indigenous arts, metalwork. When you see the work that is famous in Orissa tribes, in Chhattisgarh, all the regions, Madhya Pradesh, this is probably the legacy of the Kirats. They also knew how to weave cloth, which was very much in demand at that time. They knew how to manufacture swords, spears, bows, arrows, guns, and other firearms. And they knew how to work with gold and silver. So these are not primitive people. They are people who probably maintained what we can call a primitive lifestyle, but they knew all the arts of the time. Now we come to what did the Kirats give us by way of dharma. The Kirats gave us the Gram Devta, it is their contribution. All the gods and goddesses are revered throughout the land by tribal and non-tribal people. And this Gram Devta, the goddess, unites the earth and the territory because she is bound to a certain territory. So she also links us with the snake, the stone, the ling, the memorial stones for tribals and so on, for heroes. When you go to remote places, you'll find hero stones, memorial stones, burial stones. These are their doings. They were passionate worshippers of Shiva and Shakti. And you may have heard of the story of Kirat Arjuna, Bhairavi's famous drama. It's there in the Mahabharata also, Aranyak Parv. When Arjun kills a boar, which is simultaneously hit by another arrow. So he says, he's the primordial archer of his time. He said, this is my kill. And a tribal person comes and says, no, this is mine. And they have this fight. So Arjun, when he realizes he can't win, he quickly makes a little shivling with the mud over there and starts worshipping it. Then he finds that the flowers which he is offering are following on that tribal. So he realizes that the tribal is Shiva and he begs forgiveness and he gets a boon that he will win in the war. So this is who the tribals are. The goddess is always accompanying the god is Parvati or Hemavati, and she is being worshipped by the Kirats from ancient antiquity. Bhanbhat in his Kadambari notes this feature of the Kirats worshipping Durga as Chandi or Chamunda Devi, and she's always given the animal sacrifice. Kirats also were attracted, like other people in society, to Jain and Buddhist religions when they were faiths, when they were spreading at that time. And this shows the interaction and how close we were. We have forgotten how to interact now. But the Buddhist stupa at Sanchi mentions some of the Kirats as bhikkhus who got donations from the laity. The Jain famous monarch Haravel in Orissa, he's known by the Hathigumpa inscription of the 1st century AD. He also mentions Kirats as the devotees of the Tirthankaras. Now, the scholars who have studied them more deeply, they have said, and this is Suniti Kumar Jadri, if I remember correctly, very formidable Sanskrit scholar. He said that it is the Kirats who developed the concept of totem, who developed the philosophical doctrine of Atma, soul, transmigration, and the laws of karma. They believed that there was another world where the spirit rested, and then the account of your life was calculated, and then you got your next birth according to that. So this is their contribution to us. And the colonials, they created the megalithic monuments, which you can find in the northeast even now and deep south even now. They created the rituals of smearing with blood or with vermilion. They created the cultivation of rice, without which we cannot have any yet. They created, they grew certain vegetables and fruits like tamarind and coconut. They were the first to use the betel leaf in ritual. They created a host of folk crafts. They created the Hindu dress of dhoti and sari, and the use of turmeric and vermilion in weddings, the head cloth, the turban, the loin cloth, and they also created language and literature. There's a Buddhist text, Lalita Vistara, which says that the Kirats had 64 written languages. They have disappeared very sadly, but there is even today a script in the Mithila region. There was, but it has disappeared. So this was a highly literate people who gave us so much, which has come to us to this day. Now we come back to our colonial friends. The British, when they decided to make the tribals a separate people, first they wanted to isolate them, because tribals were mainly living in forests. Forests were the abode of wealth, which they wanted for building railways, for extracting and taking out. And therefore, they had to demonize these tribals. They had to surround them through roads and railways and cut them off from the rest of society. And they did it very well. So they won. And another thing, they hated the tribals because they did jhum cultivation. I think everyone knows jhum. You take a patch of land, burn it down, and then because of that ash, when it cools down, becomes very fertile in a superficial way. And 2-3 years of crops you can grow, and then you can move on. Now, in the ancient times, when the population was so sparse, you could do that. As you become more intensely populated, or you need the resources of the forest for other things, then it is a very inefficient way. When the British found them doing jhum and cutting down and burning these huge salve trees, which they wanted for the sleepers, for the railways, they became very, very agitated, and they started suppressing them. And then they exposed them to market forces in ways that they couldn't just cope because they were too primitive. So the tribal suffering has not been fully understood or documented by people, but it was a terrible tragedy of our times. I think that needs to be understood properly. What they also did when they were suppressing them physically, because in the early encounters, the British used to be butchered so badly that if, say 50 people entered the forest, everyone would be butchered and one man would be sent back alive to tell what happened. This is something that British and other colonial forces encountered in other countries also when they went there. Afghans did it. One man will come and say that he's half dead. He says, they've killed us all. So this they were doing with the British also. So they had to butcher them back in equal proportion. What they also did for mind control was to send the missionaries into these areas to control them, to incorporate the elite into their system, and they began their conversions with great systematic determination. I think you all know that the Charter Act of 1813 is what allowed the missionaries to come into India. But the missionaries were there 100 years before that, actually. And in in the 18th century, they were very much there. They had spread all over the place. Some of the company servants, even the governor general like Wellesley, they liked the church and they supported them. They paid for translating the Bible and taking it there. The David Scott, who was the agent in Assam, he did massive work to spread Christianity among the Garos. One of the brilliant things they did, create residential schools for family to send their children to, so they'll be educated. And Bible studies were very much compulsory in those days. So they did this, and they said, they justified what they did by saying, this is Sir John Campbell, he said, that don't think that Hinduism is not a missionary proselytizing religion like ours. And he's openly, it's so, you must have heard so much of abuse of Brahmins and their conniving ways and how they kept everyone down and thought they were superior and all that. That may be the truth with individuals anywhere. But the Brahmins whom the British were attacking were being attacked because they were good to the tribals. They accepted them and tried to bring them into the fold. Went and taught them a few rituals, a few more prayers and things. Took care of the rites of passage, birth and death and things like that. So they said, these Brahmins will go anywhere for a feast. And if we don't convert these people, they will become Brahmanical. This is the biggest expose of their own lives. I found it so hilarious when I was studying it. Then Sir Alfred Lyell, he's another very important colonial official. He said, I'll quote this, the gradual Brahmanizing of the aboriginal non-Aryan or casteless tribals, whereas caste has come from tribe. Among all these aboriginal or non-Aryan communities, a continual social change is going on. They alter their modes of life to suit improved conditions of existence. Their languages decay and they go over to the dominant Aryan rituals. So they said that the trouble with Hinduism is that you don't have to give up anything to become a Hindu. Very perceptive, you have to say that. So you can make new sects, new castes all the time. And these teachers, that is these Brahmins, without distinction of caste or creed, they preach to low caste men and to the aboriginal tribes. They succeed in those ranks of the population which would lean towards Christianity or Mohammedanism if they were not drawn into Brahmanism by some local saint or devotee. This is who we were. So he said, the tribes will easily go there because they don't have to give up anything. They just slide into Hinduism. Because actually they were the Hindus only. So they go on. This demolishes the myth of the rigid caste system. They were anxious, very anxious, because I think post-Islam, Hindus would have changed their way of functioning and they would have gone deeper and deeper into areas to protect what they could of Dharma. I don't know if Meenakshi was speaking to you on her book, Flight of Deities, that we took a god. In one case, I particularly remember of her book, the murti is taken, I think this is the Nathdwara, from the major temple, and all the way, village by village, they are informed that this god is coming. And they receive the god, they do the puja, they of course receive the pujaris and everyone. And the god is escorted properly, village by village. So this thing must have had an impact. Simultaneously, the Brahmin running from a large temple to go into a little unknown Nathdwara. Jains also ran the same way. We also buried our Tirthankaras, whatever we could rescue. So the Brahmins who ran from, say, a place like Banaras, they would have gone into the neighboring villages, or they would have gone as far as they could, and they would have taken their knowledge and information with them. So by the time the British come and there's some relief from iconoclasm and physical abuse, the Brahminization of society would have been quite advanced in my understanding. And that is why when they saw that we have to convert, because otherwise we'll not be able to maintain hold on this country. Conversion meant with the trade because of this. So they saw the Brahmin as an enemy. Either they have to be mind washed or they have to be divinized. This is what we have to realize, because that challenge exists. Today the Brahmin may not be a Brahmin caste, but it will be educated person. And I'm saying this because in my society, in my country, I see we are not adequately sensitive on this thing. So this thing, the tribal and caste continuum has been noticed by the British, who have wanted to destroy it. We have to regain that awareness. Of course, you know that they created the census as a tool of separation between tribes and non-tribes. I don't have to go into that because I think we're running out of time. Everywhere they said that wherever an aboriginal tribe comes into contact with a caste Hindu, it feels like going there. And then they notice that if there's a tribal festival which is very famous in an area, then they find the caste Hindus going there. So they got very, very irritated and they tried to do all kinds of attacks on this aspect of the tradition. I'm cutting out all that. I hope you will, if anyone feels interested, they can, the book is available on internet, so you can see the, what's it called, Amazon. Now, another thing is that the tribals were not only primitive people who lived in villages. Like any other dynamic Hindu ruler, they would also pick up the sword and become local rulers. And they did form their own states where they were the rulers. And then they got Brahmin priests and Sanskrit language to make their inscriptions, to make temples, to give donations to, and to do agriculture. So you know about this because there are copper plate inscriptions in the, what is today Madhya Pradesh, there's Rajasthan, that especially after the decline of the Gupta Empire, many tribal kingdoms came up in those areas. And we know that from the copper plate inscriptions, where they will use the Sanskrit language to tell who they are, to say that this is their local goddess, who has now become a form of Durga, and she's got a proper temple. The original Murti, tribal, maybe a stone or something is there, and a larger Murti of, say, Chamunda or Durga will be there in the temple, and it will also be serving as Chalanti Pratima in a procession when on special occasions. We find the tribals having lots and lots of kingdoms in the Madhya Pradesh region especially. And then their ruling class takes a name as Rajgond, Rajbhar, Chaivan Vanshi, etc. And they claim Kshatriya status as part of their upward mobility. That was a system at that time It worked very well for them. I just realized that we have really exceeded our time, so we can't go into that. But these kingdoms are a reality. And one of the kingdoms, you may have heard, Rani Durgavati, who defeats Afzal Khan of Akbar's general. She was a Rajput princess who got married to a tribal, because that her father would have respected the rise of that family. And her father-in-law was himself a formidable Sanskrit scholar. So there's that idea that people are primitive because they call themselves tribes has to be disabused completely. We have to de-brainwash ourselves from all the myths. They were a fabulous people. Oh, I would have loved to know this. I should have. The Gotras, if you read my book, all this thing, they were fabulous. The Mundas, the Gonds. These are very, very important things. I'm going to conclude with two small pieces. One is acculturation. The idea that tribes had nothing to do with classical Hinduism, this can be disproved very much. One, if you read my book on Sabrimala, it isn't out yet, but it's traced almost every form of that god in that area has united into Ayyappa. And he is clearly a village god. Basically, even today, the original god is a village god. But in some of the major South Indian temples, where caste feeling is supposed to be very evolved, there we have the Todas. They were the great cattle herders of the region. They serve as palanquin bearers of Shiva at the Bhuvaneshwari temple in Ooty. The Chenchus are palanquin bearers, sweepers, and watchmen at Sri Sailim. They have a hereditary share in the offering by pilgrims. Then the temples of Shiva at Pachmari has the hereditary guardianship of Korku chiefs. Jagannath is associated with the Saura tribe. Sri Venkateshwar at Tirupati is identified with Kurumbas, Lambadis, Yenadu, Yerukula, and Chenchu tribe. They have special rights here. They can enter the Garbhagriha and nobody can touch them. The Sri Subramaniam temple of Palani is also having the tribal free entry because they have a relationship with the god. In Madhya Pradesh, of course, the tribals are very powerful, so there's nothing there. Bihar, Ranchi side, you expect the tribals to be powerful in those temples. And so, yeah, I wanted to say, this Rajput model was very well established, and often when tribal rulers rose and became important, they would get Brahmins and reinvent their genealogy to prove that they had a better origin, divine or whatever. This is an entertaining part of it. But in reality, thus Patiala, a Sikh prince, married the Rajput family of Saraikela. The Budiyar from Mysore married a Rajput family in Morbi, Gujarat. Rajput and Maratha princes married and intermarried. And so on. This Rajputization was the upper mobility system at that time. The last thing I want to say, I really want to warn you all about this. I am guessing that most of the people who are here today are like myself, vegetarian. Being vegetarian, I never noticed this till a decade ago. I began to notice it, and I am now very disturbed about it. That this is covered up as compassion for animals. I'm sure that a part of it is genuine also. But there is, what is coming about is a new vegetarian / vegan evangelism, where they harass people for eating meat and they preach it as the new Messiah, something that God has spoken and things like that. This is not part of our tradition. It cuts at our system of diversity, our understanding, and we are not supposed to culturally harangue people for a way of life. Now I want to point out two things here. One is Jani Shikar. Jani Shikar is a very important festival of the Oraon tribe in Orissa. It is covered, it's a tribe. There's no tribal actually exclusive to one region. They are in Chota Nagpur, Santhal Parganas, Ranchi, and Jharkhand, Bihar, Orissa. So a fairly large tribe at that time. And then there's the Bihar Tribal Research Institute at Ranchi. They have done some research and they say that Jani Shikar began in 1610 in the reign of Jahangir. And it is since celebrated every 12 years to celebrate the bravery of tribal women of that area. Now what happened? The Mughals were always attacking the Oraon because, like the British later, they also wanted the control of the forest and the wealth of the forest. And these people were beating them back. And then one day, always a fifth column is there, someone said that you can defeat them immediately after their harvest festival of Sarhul. The men will be too drunk to even get up. So you go. Now that happens, the men are too drunk to even stand or know what's going on. But these women of the tribes, they don the clothes of the warriors and they go and beat them back. Mughals run so fast. Later, when they came to know that they were beaten by women, they are furious. They come back, they try to attack 2-3 times before they accept that they've been beaten back and we have to go. Now, I don't know what happened to the men when they woke up, but this thing is celebrated every 12 years. The women of these villages will dress up, take the blessings of their village priest and go and hunt in the area. And the village to which they enter, the headman has to come forward, the head priest over there. He will say, either I'll arrange a feast for you or I'll let you hunt in the area. Mostly they hunt and they take back their kill, mostly a hen or something, or a small deer. And they go back to their village, take blessings from the priest, and then they have the feast over there. It goes for 3-4 days. This is a very, very unique thing. And if we, in the name of animal rights, say that a hen or a duck cannot be killed, we will be cutting at the Kshatriya tradition in our country. We should not do it. A marital tradition cannot, a martial tradition cannot be rubbished because PETA in America thinks that when the animals are too big to care for, too many, they will put them in some thing and raise funds for their welfare. We must be less hypocritical about it. Non-vegetarian food will not disappear by shaming people. We will drive people away from Hindu society just to eat meat. I don't think this is in anyone's benefit. My last point is on Jallikattu. Jallikattu is also a rural festival. It would have had a tribal origin. We can easily sense. In this, the bulls are reared by well-off families even today. And their really enormous wealth and love is bestowed on them to train them to be a very puissant animal. And the festival involves that in every village, the animals for Jallikattu will be brought to the temple. The temple animals will be released in the field first and nobody will touch them. The competing animals will be led into the arena and various puissant youth will try to get onto the hump of the animal and hold it for 30 to 45 seconds or till the finishing line. Actually, the bulls never let you hang on, so it is very difficult to win that. Unlike Spanish bullfights, the animal is not killed. Every year, the same animal comes and shows its prowess. What this animal rights activists did, especially inspired by PETA, they ran the most horrible campaign, the most ugly campaign on the issue, and they got the Supreme Court to ban all animal races in rural India across the country. Maharashtra and South India were most badly affected. Now, we supported it, we didn't know what to do. Then one day, I had a small role here. I came to know that these animal activists had asked then Environment Minister Jairam Ramesh to change the rules inside the quietly. So there's a rule banning the use of performing animals in public. Performing animals meant lions and tigers and those wild animals which have never been domesticated. It never included a domestic animal. But he put bulls in there. So when the case came to Supreme Court said, no, it is banned. It's not allowed. I came to know this. So I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister in 2014 when the new government came. I said, I have understood that this is the reason why the Supreme Court banned it. And these people are at Marina Beach standing there in millions. If we tweak back the law and say that bulls are not performing animals in that category, then the law will be undone, the mischief. I got an acknowledgement actually, and I was told it's being sent. That time Prakash Javadekar was the minister. He did it when the case came to the court undid that. This was an inside story which nobody knows, and this was overdone. But in that time, thousands, hundreds at least of bulls which would be worth 2 to 4 lakhs each were sold for 18,000 to the butcher because the person didn't know what to do with it. For farming, you're not using the bull. Everyone has big farms. They're all using tractor. This was an issue of pride, cultural continuity, and this damage was done. So without looking at all the paradigm, we cannot destroy our own culture and our own selves in this way. This was something I really wanted, that Hindus have always had different dharma for different people. There cannot be a monotheism here. We are not monotheists. Within the animal kingdom of which humans are a part, there are in the forest a hierarchy of the vegetarian animal and the non-vegetarian. So if the giraffe or the elephant has enough to eat, it means the rest of the jungle down is fine. If the tiger and the leopard, the mountain lion, if they have enough to eat, then that means that the food chain is all right, down to the bottom. But we are creating conflicts where none exist. Why should it matter to me if my neighbor is eating a chicken or a goat or anything? My interest would be that we stop. India should not accept meat as an industry. Nowhere in the world should we have farms to rear animals for killing. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't overfish in the oceans. We are storing meat for years. There's enough meat in the world. If you stop totally, you can do it. There has to be a more dharmic way of doing it. If we do the non-vegetarianism the way the great-grandmother did it, it will be a better world. We'll balance everything perfectly. We don't have to say, stop eating beef because methane, then climate change will be better. This will be inane arguments. Just do it in a dharmic way, and it is better for everyone. The tribals have already shown us the way, and we should respect them and try to go back to those things. Thank you.